Wow. Stop it. Stop it right now. Wow. Let me start by saying, first of all, to Chair of the Board, Jesse Ruiz, and to President Killeen, thank you so much for the great honor to have this opportunity. And Mary Gresh, my Vice President for the foundation, is in the room. So Mary, close your ears. You didn't hear this. But thank you so much for welcoming me back home to a place that has shaped fundamentally my perspective on higher education and provided a platform where I would be able to leave this great university and become the 34th president of another one of the fine public universities in the world. And as you're going to hear, part of my ongoing narrative and that I really talked about a lot is that by a lot of metrics and benchmarks, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here representing and being welcomed back home. It's very rare. You can leave a place. And I can tell you, in these challenging economic times, I don't know what the heck I did here, but I want to patent it and try to see if I can use that IP to make some money to help support the things that I care about. But let me get started here and first of all say that I am so grateful to be here with you, and I am very pleased to be delivering this year's David Dodds Henry Lecture, which honors a leader who you've heard so much time today, who did so much to expand access and excellence at the University of Illinois, including his seminal work to create educational opportunities. In his 16 years as the president of the University of Illinois, Dr. Henry fundamentally transformed the university during one of the most turbulent eras in American history. As you heard, he built new facilities, he raised the university's profile and academic standing, and in keeping with the Illinois core mission as a land-grant university, one of the original land grants, he also doubled enrollment, which is, you know, something I care greatly about. So as the president who served during the civil rights era, he also took pains to meet the moment by launching Project 500 to create more access and enrollment of underrepresented students. Project 500 eventually led to the creation of the Afro-American Culture Center and subsequently many initiatives to support ethnic and cultural minority students, faculty, and staff. He also expanded the University of Illinois from a single campus into a university system that educates more than 53% of the undergraduate students in the state of Illinois. So Dr. Henry's significant work to expand access to education, especially for students who have been historically excluded and marginalized, resonates very strongly with me personally. Because as you've heard far too many times over my 9 years tenure here, I grew up in the Jim Crow South. I graduated from the segregated public schools of Dawson, Georgia, Terrell County. Higher education transformed my life and opened countless doors for me. Because I remind you again, by the metrics and the benchmarks of my time, I am not supposed to be here, but here I am. My lived experiences inform my aspiration as a university leader to increase access to excellence and an affordable higher education for every talented, motivated student, especially those whom opportunities have historically been denied. I was very, very proud to help carry out David Dodds Henry's legacy during my 9-year tenure as the 10th Chancellor of the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and to carry out that unwavering commitment to continue to be able to continue this work in my current role as the 34th President of the University of Washington. Since Dr. Henry's time, however, research universities, like the world in which they inhabited, have been dramatically changed. And today, as educators, scholars, scientists, university leaders, trustees, regents, and members of the general public, we are experiencing change at a pace that would have defied belief 20 or even 10 years ago. A diminishing trust, I believe, in higher education and institutions in general have collided with accelerating technological changes and rapidly evolving cultural norms. The results of this dynamic interplay is that research universities in particular, and I must say, I want to be very clear about this, they must undertake the difficult and essential work of changing, absolutely changing to meet the needs of our students, our communities, and the broader society that we are built to serve. And we must do so. We must do so if we are going to be able to retain the social license, and I want you to remember that term, to retain the social license to teach, to innovate, and to promote the public good. But first, I want to share with you a quote that, from my perspective, really does seem to encapsulate the current moment. Quote, "We today are probably living in one of the eras of the greatest rapidity of change in the history of human institutions. New tools and techniques are being developed with stupendous celerity, while in the wake of these technological developments, increasing frequency and strong cultural waves are sweeping over us from without, drenching us with the material and the non-material habits of other centers." Quote close. In many ways, you might assume that this is a quote from a recent issue of the New York Times or the Chronicle of Higher Education, but it's not. It was written by an American sociologist, Robert and Helen Lynn, in their landmark publication, Middletown, a study of contemporary American culture, and it was published nearly a century ago. So it reminds me of that old expression, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So I share this to remind us, all of us, that our nation and our society have undergone eras of rapid change before, and we will do so again. But as members of the Academy, we have the opportunity and the obligation to help our students and our communities thrive in response to the changing world that's all around us. I think this is critically important to the resilience of U.S. higher education system, which is known as the best in the world. But today's students will enter higher education and ultimately a labor market in which AI and other emerging technologies play an inescapable role. They are inheriting a politically polarized society in which credible information is frequently, very frequently obscured by misinformation, where democratic norms are being upended, and where a majority of the U.S. adult population across the spectrum are saying that Democratic and Republican leaders cannot even agree upon basic facts. Indeed, the rejection of empiricism mirrors the erosion of public confidence in higher education. For example, surveys conducted by Gallup shows that the percentage of Americans who have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in colleges and universities has fallen by 15 points, from 57% in 2015 to just 42% in 2025. We cannot afford to ignore these trends. Alongside this decline in trust, Americans are expressing an unprecedented level of skepticism about the value and the importance of a college degree. Gallup poll shows a steep drop in the percentage of Americans who believe that a four-year degree is very important for producing educated people prepared for rewarding careers. It is important to note that this decline is happening across all demographic groups and age ranges, including those who have historically expressed support for higher education. However, the steepest drop-off in confidence has occurred over the last 15 years among people who identify as either Republicans or independents, reflecting again a growing polarization across political spectrum that is by now familiar to each and every one of us in this room and across civic life. When you take all of this together, folks, the decline in trust and growing devaluation of what research universities provide to students, to the public, is leading to an overall weakening of the perception of American higher education, and again, that social license to operate that this particular sector has enjoyed for more than 85 years. According to a Pew Research Center poll conducted in September of 2025, 7 out of 10 Americans believe that U.S. higher education is going in the wrong direction. So the fundamental question for each and every one of us in this room today and around the U.S. is, what is driving these trends? There are several key factors, and unfortunately, time will not allow me to address them all. But the first among these is the deep public concern over the rising cost of tuition and the enormous student debt that our students graduate with. And according to the Federal Reserve, the total outstanding student loan debt in the U.S. has surpassed $1.8 trillion, with an average debt load balance of more than $40,000 owed by 42.8 million student borrowers. To give you some context, that's about 1/6 of the U.S. total population. So I hope you can begin to see that too many Americans feel that a college education is financially out of reach, or at least it's a poor investment for themselves, which is scary enough, but to also think the same thing about their children and their grandchildren. So there's also the perception, and I know it's hard for us academics to embrace, but there's a perception that universities are too elitist, ivory towers, inhospitable to conservative viewpoints, and is crucibles for liberal biases. That is something that we need to think about. Heated debates over free speech, ideological orthodoxy, and role of diversity and inclusion efforts that fuel the narrative that universities are more interested in pushing a particular agenda than in serving the broad public good and offering a free exchange of ideas. And there is a growing sense that the academy is failing to keep up with the rapid technological and economic changes that are transforming society as we know it. The rise in automation and growth of AI and the shifting demands of a globally connected, technological-driven workforce have left many to question the economic relevance and adaptability of a traditional four-year degree. I believe that these factors are absolutely fundamental to changing what it means to be an educated person today and perhaps way into the future. We can see clearly that these factors reflected in a recent statewide survey conducted by the AAU, the Association of American Universities, on behalf of the University of Washington. Among the responders who were the most skeptical of University of Washington, their chief concerns were affordability and access, neutrality and bias, and whether or not we were doing a good job at career preparation. But if we want to earn the public trust, we must address these concerns head on, and we must be able to adapt to the changing landscape and to focus on the pressing needs of communities and the economy. I believe that as university leaders at Public Research University, and as being a leader of one of those for more than 2 decades, and being a first-generation college student myself, access to an affordable college education for every student is and must be the cornerstone of not only my administrative career, but all of us that have the great privilege to lead. So since becoming the president of University of Washington, my top priority has been to address the factors that contribute to a loss in public trust by creating the structures that will enable every resident undergraduate to graduate in 4 years free of debt. Now, I'm very proud to say that that's not an impossible task because already we have a good track record in this regard. Last year alone, 71% of the undergraduate students graduated from UW with no debt. That's hard for some people to believe because I had the same problem here in Illinois when I quoted those numbers for this great university. They don't want to hear it. They don't believe it. But as a nation, we can and we must do better. So I challenge each and every one of us to close the gap for resident undergraduate students at public colleges and universities. And please note, I said debt-free. I didn't say free. That's important to remember, because I was raised that anything that was free wasn't worth a darn, because they use a different word down where I came from, but I think you get the point. Our students take far too long to graduate. I told them I'm tired of hearing about 5-year or 6-year graduations rates to complete a bachelor's degree because it increases the cost and delays the entry of young people into the workforce. And that's why we need to emphasize supporting students in completing their undergraduate work in 4 years. And for public universities, that is really dependent not only on federal but state support to enable us to keep in-state tuition and financial support for middle and low-income students is an absolutely critical investment in the state's future, and I believe the economic vitality of the entire nation. But why is debt-free education so important? Given the fact that college graduates are likely, more than not, to offset the student debt over their lifetime of earning. For many students, especially those from low economic backgrounds, first-generation families, and particular communities of color, the prospect of educational debt is a barrier to even apply, in many cases, to college. These talented students or young people are often left on the sideline, which hurts not only them, I believe it does significant harm to our whole economy. Those that do take on debt are more constrained in their postgraduate choices. They may not be able to enter the fields that they prefer. They may not enter professions like teaching or social work or the nonprofit sector. That also keeps people from pursuing graduate and professional degrees. That means fewer doctors, fewer attorneys, and fewer engineers. And it leads to fewer scholars and scientists and innovators and entrepreneurs. That also delays home ownership and starting a family and making it harder for people to enter the so-called middle class and building generational wealth. Recent polling data strongly suggests that this may be an important step to restoring public trust, particularly in the state of Washington. While there's an overwhelming belief that a degree from the University of Washington is valuable, only about 38% of Washington residents say that a UW degree is valuable, but also worth the cost. The plurality says that while a UW degree is valuable, it isn't worth the cost paid to earn it. But the power of a debt-free education becomes clear when respondents are told that more than 70% of UW's graduates graduate with no known debt. And after that, the percentage of residents who think a UW degree is valuable and worth the cost jumps to 58%, 20 percentage points. So if we can, as a university, not only University of Washington, but we can all start to embrace the notion of students being able to earn a degree without taking on enormous debt, without them being encumbered with debt for a very long period. We believe that our data shows 3/4 of the residents would then think that the degree is valuable and very much worth the cost. So I hope this in some ways demonstrate the impact that the concerns about debt would have on the perception for families and the public that we serve. It also shows how powerful the notion of a debt-free education is for changing this perception that is deeper than we are willing to acknowledge. And more importantly, it enables students to start their lives without being burdened with student loans and other debt. So if a debt-free education is one side of the coin, the other side, I believe, is producing future-ready graduates. And I want to emphasize our goal in this society in which we live is producing future-ready graduates. It is going to look very different than it has in the past. The labor market is evolving rapidly, and we are keenly aware of the accelerating impact of AI. Without a doubt, AI presents new challenges and, yes, new risks, but also new opportunities. But I firmly believe that the biggest risk we face would be failing to prepare students to effectively use the newest tools in a toolbox that has been growing ever since the Industrial Revolution. And of course, you all would agree that as with every technological leap forward, AI is arguably making some skill sets obsolete. Let me just give you an example of that. One of the most renowned professors at the University of Washington is Professor Emeritus Ed Lazowski of the University of Washington's Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering. Acknowledging in a recent article, he said the following about software coding as a career. He said, basically, that is dead. But he goes on to say that coding is not what top engineering programs like UW and like the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, that is not the goal of these programs in the first place. Top computer scientist program educate students as software engineering, critical thinkers, who work in teams in order to identify, and not only just identify, but to work in teams to solve the most complex challenges that are facing our society. In fact, this could serve as a working definition for every discipline in every program within a top world-class university and what it owes, I believe, to each and every one of his students. And we think in the context of what it means to be educated. By teaching them to work collaboratively and to harness and to build the tools to solve problems, universities are equipping our students to be technology ready and including using AI as an augmentation, not as a replacement. In fact, at the UW, when I talk to my colleagues at Boeing, they are very, very clear that the A doesn't mean artificial, it means augmented intelligence. And I know we had that same principle at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So this in light as another example of what I'm talking about here comes from one of our emeritus professors who put it this way: you won't be replaced by an AI system, but you might be replaced by a person who uses AI better than you do. And I learned that lesson from my wife. I know you all remember Lynn, who had to debate about some of her colleagues that told her she'd be out of job, and this was 10 years ago, because AI was going to replace all of the radiologists. They were no longer going to be needed. And so the same principle exists there, that a radiologist that's trained in AI tools will replace a radiologist that is not. So to be proactive and to up-level your work with AI, research universities have always served as training grounds for talent, curiosity, and for people to learn how to use technology. Where AI is different is the speed at which it is changing the landscape. This underscores the need for more flexibility, more modular education pathways that can better serve evolving needs of today's learners. At the University of Washington, we are already exploring ways to create new innovative opportunities for students to be competitive in an AI-driven workforce. Among these efforts is a new partnership that I had the great pleasure of signing with Brad Smith from Microsoft just a few weeks ago that will provide faculty and student researchers access to advanced computing capabilities that enable modern AI training, experimentation, and research and instruction, and will also support our literacy efforts across pre-K through 12. So as a part of this partnership, UW faculty and visiting professors and students will be able to connect with real-world research opportunities through a research marketplace that is supported by Microsoft AI for Good Lab. It will also establish 10 new graduate student research slots per year. And our continuing educational arm, which is called the Continuing College at UW, will be co-developing educational programs with Microsoft that help Washingtonians navigate everything related to AI workforce and transition to meet the evolving job needs. So this kind of reskilling and upskilling must be absolutely an integral component of what we provide to job students, to job seekers, and the students we educate. So more broadly, what is going on here, folks, from my perspective, is part of an ongoing evolution that is fundamentally redefining what it means to be an educated person. And as higher education leaders, I know that's hard for us to think about spending time in upskilling and reskilling, but if we don't do it, I don't know who's going to do it, because the industry is telling me they trust universities to do it more than they trust the private sector. This transformation will depend on deep collaborations and what I call radical partnerships with industry that will foster a healthier ecosystem in which the barriers between the classroom and the laboratory and the job site are much more permeable. As technology evolves, employers will need programs that can train their existing employees. And as students preparing to enter the workforce, They will need access to internships and other kinds of real-world experiences that will make them more employable after graduation. And employers are telling me, as I know they've told President Colleen at a trip to India a few years ago, that they're going to have to upskill 50% of their current workforce as soon as in the next 5 years, and the 5 years after that, they're going to have to do the same thing all over again. That's an example of the changing ecosystem and technological landscape of change that's undergoing. So done well, it's easy to envision a kind of revolving door between industry and academy that fosters a more robust pipeline for employees and to those employees that are trained in the latest technology. Higher education cannot shy away from the fundamental changes that this new way of thinking will require. I believe that our sector must be willing to not entertain these new models, such as stackable credentials that will build forward a degree over time so that students can get well-paying jobs right out of high school and get these credentials as their careers progress. We even need to consider whether some bachelor's degree programs, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're having discussion this as a part of the University of Illinois system as well, might be conferred in 3 years. What's so magical about a historic system that said 4 years, it takes 4 years to get a bachelor's degree? And so we're considering all of these things as a possibility for change. And by streamlining the credits that a student needs to be prepared for the workforce. So we are gathered here at this critical, pivotal moment in time, where I believe that the 80-year-old compact between the federal government and research universities that has made us the most amazing and a healthier country and has provided safety and prosperity for this nation is under great challenge. It has produced the most fertile period of progress in human history. Yet the threats to federal research funding and to the basic terms of that compact have all been put into jeopardy in the last 12 months or so. And while it has been heartening to see policymakers from across both sides of the aisle come together to preserve much of the research funding that fuels American competitiveness, I'm afraid that there are many challenges that still remain. Cuts to federal financing through the loan borrowing caps and elimination of Grad Plus loan, as well as policies that really have driven away international graduate students, amounts to basically a self-inflicted wound to our great nation. Delays in issuing research grants threaten critical research into cancer, Alzheimer's, and other conditions. These and other actions have already done damage to our nation's health and prosperity agenda, and that damage can grow larger. At the same time as allies and adversaries seek to replace us in the world of research and in the world of innovation. Higher education and industry must gently advocate across political spectrums for policies that have made the U.S. a world leader in scientific discovery and innovation for decades. And we must also acknowledge and address those areas where our institutions have lost their way, such as on issues of the value and relevance of a university degree, so that we can regain the public trust, as I said earlier. But a time when faith in all manners of institutions, from government to business, is in a decline, this work must happen as part of an effort to first and foremost, and those that know me, know I wouldn't leave the stage without talking about this next one, and that is repairing and strengthening the civic health overall for our society. The University of Washington, like many others, our university and our research peers are driven by a mission to serve the public good. And throughout the University of Washington's 165-year history, our understanding of what it means to serve the public good has shifted along with evolving cultural norms. Today, it is indisputably fact that civic health is deteriorating and that the public good would be well served by efforts to absolutely restore civic trust, a shared sense of values, and faith in public institutions like our universities. Research universities are perfectly positioned to support these efforts. We provide education that cultivates the habits, the civic inquiry, the information literacy, and the sense of social responsibility. We also contribute to the research and the scholarship that makes facts clear and creditable. As large public serving institutions, research universities can and must play a critical role in convening across sectors, building collaborations that support collective problem solving, even and especially across differences, without trying to control the outcome. One of the things that drew me to the University of Washington was its strength in this arena. The university is home to something we call a Center for Informed Public that was launched in 2019 to bring together the university's resources to resist strategic misinformation, but to promote an informed society and to strengthen democratic discourse. With support from the Evans School of Public Policy and Governors and the Office of the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, we are now poised to go further through our civic health initiatives that really is going to be willing our research power and educational mission to develop scalable and model integrated solutions for civic health renewal. This interdisciplinary cross-sectional effort will provide the opportunity to support leaders working across difference to reduce friction between the academy and the community and to build deep collaboration. It will also strengthen our long-term trust building, enhance community outcomes, and ensure the durability of the university's work in civic health. By fostering civic inquiry and promoting informed discourse, research universities, I believe, can rebuild trust and relationships with community, not only helping to bolster civic health and democratic structures, but also my recurring theme is how do we restore public trust in the universities that were designed to serve as pillars of that in our society. I began this talk by sharing a quote about the speed and scale of change that American universities are experiencing across 100 years or so. I will close with the reflection on another historical period that I believe revolutionized that mission and helped build the identity of Americans' higher education system. The creation of the land-grant university system radically democratized American higher education. Created through the Morrill Act of 1862 and 1890, the land-grant colleges did not just create greater capacity and geographical proximity for students. They embraced a broader, more inclusive vision of higher education. Public land-grant colleges opened the doors to students from diverse backgrounds and empowered them to apply their knowledge and skills to the pressing challenges of our time. They became the engines of innovation to drive advances in the field of agriculture, engineering, and natural sciences that had a tangible impact on the lives of a lot of people across this great nation. So just as the land-grant universities responded to the needs, the rapid changing needs, economical changes of society in the 19th century, I believe whether you're a land-grant university or not, we all should take a moment to redefine the role of research universities to meet the challenges of the 21st century through more of a land-grant university framework. This will require us to balance our traditional academic pursuits with a renewed commitment to serve the public good and addressing the pressing needs of communities and the workforce. So if we are to gain the public trust and fulfill the vital role as engines of opportunities and innovation and social progress, we must embrace the change and adapt to the new demands of the 21st century. We must listen to the public, we must address their concerns, and we must foster a stronger partnership with industry and government and community organizations. And by working closely with all of these stakeholders, I believe that we can ensure that our academic and research programs are truly responsive to the evolving needs of workforce and our broader society. And we can address the challenge that puts us at risk of losing that social license to operate that we've endured for nearly 100 years. This will not be easy. It absolutely will not be easy, but it's absolutely necessary. By affirming our commitment to serving the public good and fostering meaningful partnerships and continuously evolving to meet the rapid needs of the changing world, Research University can once again secure their roles as beacons of opportunity and prosperity for all. Thank you for allowing me to be with you. Deeply honored.
Thank you. Bravo. Thank you. What an inspiring start to the morning as you remind us, Robert. No, don't go anywhere.
Oh, whoops.
Whoa, please don't go.
I almost fell off my chair.
Note to self, wait till he's down before I turn him around. Inspiring us to think about how the more things change, the more they stay the same. But at the same time, needing to consider what the future of the world looks like and how do we act today to ensure that it's a thrivable world tomorrow. If you have questions, please write them down, and the team is in the back to prepare them. But Robert, you talked about radical collaboration, and I've seen you build it in Albany. You built it here in Illinois. You outlined how you are building it in Washington. What advice would you have for higher ed leaders today about how do you go about actually effectively building cross-sector collaborations?
Well, let me just say the basic premise for that is something that's been a recurring theme that started very early in my tenure here at the University of Illinois that I've been able to carry over to Washington with this very dynamic ecosystem where we have all this proximity to a lot of Fortune 500 companies, perhaps more than any other place, any other university. But it started here with the notion that most of the challenges we face as a society are too large for any one investigator or any one institution to solve alone. That you have to form these radical partnerships in order to come up with a more rapid and sustainable solutions to the grand challenges that we face in society. We tried to exemplify this with more than 7 or 8 years ago when I was approached by Bob Zimmer, God rest his soul, about partnering with University of Chicago to do something that we'd never even thought about doing before. And that was this private university that we're accustomed to competing against in the University of Illinois system because they have this propensity to want to steal all of our best faculty, but I'm just being honest. But Bob and I were thinking beyond that competition. You got to compete to maintain your best and the brightest. He saw a better, more sustainable solution regarding quantum computing when we worked together to start the Chicago Quantum Exchange. That was the first real live example for me as a leader of University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, about how universities need to stop thinking about business as usual, to think about partnerships that are perhaps perceived to be unusual. That led, secondly, to the Shan Zuckerberg BioHub, where once again we were expected to do things differently. It was in play $250 million to create a research partnership where the money was not going to be divided by the three partners, but you had to build a whole new infrastructure, and it's located, you can walk there almost from here, where the CZ BioHub is a place where the best minds from all three of the universities come together in one place to pursue a common agenda around understanding the inflammatory response and how that leads to a cascade in the fact that most people die because of inflammation, not because of the disease itself. So that was the second example. And the third one is the one that was mentioned when the governor, Pritzker, came up with this great idea of investing in the issue of quantum and quantum computing by presenting the opportunity for University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign to be a lead along with Chicago and Northwestern and other institutions, some of which are in this room, other universities and communities to create the Illinois Quantum and Microelectronic Park. And I want you folks to know that was not just only one of the biggest ideas across this nation. Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows about what you're doing, we're doing, I can't say we, you folks are doing here in the great state of Illinois that sets you apart and provides the opportunity for the building of a utility-grade, fault-tolerant quantum computer. There's no place in the U.S. or I would believe in the world that has a better opportunity to do that than this Illinois Quantum and Microelectronic Park, because it involves DARPA, it involves the private sector, and is viewed as one of the biggest innovative ideas. So that's what I'm talking about. Not business as usual, business as unusual. And I started pontificating about this as Washington, only to understand that they've been doing radical partnerships for 55 years through this thing called WWAMI. It stands for Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho, where UW runs the medical schools. And those other 4 states, why? Because they don't have population large enough to sustain medical degrees and clinical research. That's radical, folks. It's so radical, nobody else in the nation or the world has even tried it. But it works because of the specific Northwest ecosystem. So some things you can do, you gotta leverage geographical assets and proximity. So I know that's a long-winded answer to a very simple question, but it's not simple, it's radical.
It's radical. Well, let's keep going on the radical then. You talked about how do we partner outside of higher education. You talked a little bit of partnering in higher education, particularly with the research universities. As we rebuild public trust, a lot of our communities are served by community colleges, regional public comprehensive institutions. How do we partner within higher education across sectors to better rebuild public trust?
Well, again, I think it requires thinking out of the box. And I see my good friend Juan sitting over there, and I'm going to use that as an example. One of the things I'm extremely proud of, and we are been very big about transfers from community colleges at the University of Illinois to the university and any higher education institution. What was it, Juan, about almost 4 years ago now, through conversation with Rashid Bashir, myself, and Juan, we came up with this notion, we have a good number of students transferring from city colleges, one of the largest collection of colleges in the country, 75,000 students or more, I think we were talking last night. We want to be more strategic and intentional about those students being prepared for the workforces of the future, because one of the things we had to accept is that we have some great colleges of engineering across many different sectors here, but we still are not able to meet the workforce need for engineers here in the state of Illinois. So one of the ways we decided to do that is to work with Juan and his team to create a school of engineering that operates within the city colleges that becomes a seamless pathway to the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and we're not greedy, any other place that students want to attend to pursue an engineering degree. So that's one of the ways. You got to move beyond just your traditional. And we do have to have articulation agreements to make sure community college transfer is seamless. And one of the things I'm greatly proud to be part of is Bloomberg's American Talent Initiative, that we've been able to get them to shift their focus away from just focusing on the number of Pell-eligible students that each university, public, private, small, large, to be more strategically focused on helping all of these institutions do a better job of partnering with community colleges to create a more rapid and seamless pathway into our universities and colleges. And I have to admit, it's the first time that the Bloomberg he got so excited about this new direction, they put about $50 million in play to create opportunities for universities to think differently, to be more strategic and build more radical partnership with the community colleges to accelerate transfer agreements.
All right, one last question, and it's about leadership. One of the things I get to do, I run the Association of Governing Boards Institute for Leadership and Governance, preparing people who think they want to be a president. They used to want to be a president. Now they're saying, I'm not sure I want to do this job. Because they're looking at the challenges.
I can understand why.
Right? You're
Yeah.
in your third presidency now.
Yeah.
Why do you keep going? And what advice, and I mean that honestly, right? Why keep taking on these challenges? And what advice would you give to young leaders who are thinking about, is there a role for me as a leader of higher education?
Well, let me answer that in the following ways. I have always, ever since I started my first presidency at SUNY Albany in 2013, I have a large number of young people that come to me and say, oh, I'm so pleased to meet you. I want to be a university president. I said, okay, first of all, tell me why. And I don't mean that in disrespect, but tell me why you want to be a university president. And far too often, they have this misperception that you got all this power and everybody loves you. And I have to give them a dose of reality. I'm sorry, that may be the way it is in the comic books, but it's not what works in real time. But I say that to say that there are a lot of young people who don't understand that, notwithstanding the fact that past 20 years, there have been a lot of people who come into leadership of universities, even research universities, that don't have an academic background. But I'm going to say this, notwithstanding those few exceptions. I said the first thing you need to do is become the best academic, the best professor, the best teacher, the very best student affairs person you possibly can be. Take care of the academic and the scholarly stuff first. And then once you navigate your way through that, then you can really start to look at leadership training programs, because I can tell you one of the best things that I owe everything that I've achieved in life to a guy named Bob Brunix, who was the president of the University of Minnesota, who took a chance on me when there were many others that wouldn't have hired me to become the executive vice provost for faculty and academic personnel, because I didn't have the historic background that most of the folks that were leading institutions. That provided an opportunity for me to demonstrate my abilities, but he also insisted that I take the used to be called the CIC Academic Leadership Program that I later ran for the university, and it also sent me up to the Harvard Educational Management course. So there's has to be more thought. And I inspire young people, notwithstanding the current dispensation, where in particular the last 12 months, these were always difficult jobs, but they've been exponentially more difficult than any point in time in U.S. history in the last 12 months. But there's an old expression where I come from, that's when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So that's why I alluded to what I said on the front end. My experience at this great university prepared me to navigate not only my transition out of here, but also my transition into Washington, to be more strategic and actually to navigate that this is the most, you can't just put your head in the sand and think that this is something, it's something we're going through, hopefully not two, hopefully that won't be a recurrence of this. But it provided an opportunity for me to not just worry about the current situation, but to do those things that were absolutely necessary to protect that social contract between the federal government and American universities. Everything we've done over the last 14 months have been fundamentally focused on doing that. And unfortunately, I never thought I'd be in higher education long enough to think that I would ever have to sue the federal government, not I, the collective I, all of us in higher education, through the work that started with one of the individuals that I had the pleasure of bringing back to his alma mater from Oklahoma, Kelvin Drogemeyer. Started out as a conversation at the University of Illinois called the Thursday Group. And they met with Susan Martinez and a bunch of other folks to figure out what is going to be the impact of all the executive orders and how we're going to have to sustain our research enterprise, notwithstanding that this thing became a national effort, thanks to Barbara Schneider at AAU and the folks at APLU. Created an ecosystem where they litigated on behalf of our institutions so we wouldn't have to do the impossible task of trying to do it individually across this great nation. So that is an example, I believe, of how everything that I've learned across my academic and my administrative career has prepared me and others like me who care about the value proposition to work tirelessly to mitigate the irreparable harm if this contract is voided. That we not only need to litigate, but we got to innovate too, folks. Don't get too comfortable with the status quo, because it could change at any moment. So I hope one of the things we talk about is research resiliency. How do we think about a different model for financing the future of research and innovation? Because I can tell you, even though we were able to mitigate some of the damage against the proposed shifting of F&A costs to 15%, I think we would be foolish to assume that we are ever going to go back to where every institution negotiates its own facilities and administrative costs. We have not openly, but we've quietly, through our action, by creating a better mousetrap or a better model, have declared that that was one part of this ecosystem that's not sustainable. So you got to be able to acknowledge what's not working and try to create a better system forward. And I think that's one of the challenges. And the last part of your question is, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do when I transitioned out of 9 years at one of the most amazing universities in the world. But when you get to be my age, no jokes about that, huh? All right. When you get to be my age, my wife would tell you we had this discussion sometimes, and she knows me well, and I think she was fearful of me not having something defined to do each and every day. So when the UW opportunity came about, and I've told them this, and I think Mary Gresh is in the room somewhere. Mary wave so these people will know they've got one spy in here listening. Hey, Mary. Mary, I mean, I have to admit, I wasn't exactly looking forward to starting all over again, leading a new university. But that was something so compelling about this place that I felt very strongly that everything that I learned along the way, and potentially most recently at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, that at this point in my life, I've got to go with what I know, not try to reinvent myself doing something that I'm not sure I would be as passionate about. And so that's why they wanted a seasoned leader, and boy, did they get one. So,
Please join me in thanking a tough and inspirational leader.